Welcome to the online tutorial Essay Writing for Business Students, brought to you by the Academic Language and Learning Success Program. The learning objectives for today's workshop are to identify the structure of an essay, to analyse the features of a good essay introduction and conclusion, to identify a good thesis statement, and to analyse the features of a well-written paragraph. We'll start with some of the common questions that students ask with relation to essays. One of the most common questions is, do I need to put my opinion in an essay? And the short answer to that is yes, you do, although in academic writing we generally call it a thesis, or the position that you are going to try and convince your readers of. A lot of students then ask, but I'm a student, I'm not an expert on this topic, so how can I have an opinion on this topic? And the answer to that is, well, it depends on the research that you do. You read what other people have written about this topic, you look at the evidence they've used to come to their conclusions, and then you come to your own conclusions based on what you've read, and you try to convey that through the essay that you're writing. Some people then ask, but what if my teacher doesn't agree with my opinion? Well, it shouldn't matter whether or not your teacher agrees with your opinion. The point is, your teacher wants to see that you've researched the topic thoroughly, that you've understood it, that you're aware that there are perhaps different sides, different points of view on this particular topic, and that you then present your own point of view and use your own evidence and supporting arguments to try to persuade the reader of what you think is valid. Let's have a look at an example essay question, because of course all of the essays that you will be writing at university will be in response to a topic or a question provided to you. In this case, the topic is, in the business world, a number of situations have recently become major ethical issues. The question then is, referring to current literature, outline what business ethics is and discuss whether it is important. Now, before we can start doing anything, we need to be very clear about how we are supposed to approach this task, and to do that we need to focus on what we call the instruction or directive words, which in this case are these two verbs: outline what business ethics is and discuss whether it is important. Outline in this case means to give some kind of definition or explanation, and discuss means to look at different sides of this particular topic and then present our own opinion, our own position through our thesis and the supporting arguments. So once we've analysed the question, once we've got a bit of a sense of how we're going to approach it, we need to start planning. All essays should have a basic plan, and you should always have this plan in front of you before you start writing. Now here's an example of my essay outline, which I provided in the form of an argument map. I've decided that my thesis, the thing that I want to convince my readers of, is that ethics is an important concept in business. And there's a couple of ways I'm going to do that. I'm going to start off by explaining, defining and discussing what ethics actually means, and that will form the first main body paragraph of my essay. Then I'm going to explain the importance of business ethics with regard to reputation. Now this will form the second main body paragraph of my essay. And finally, I'm going to explain the importance of business ethics with regard to value, and again this will form its own paragraph. Of course, at the end of the essay I would also need a conclusion to sum up my thesis and my arguments. So I've analysed the question, I've written a brief outline. How do I start writing? Well, first, an essay structure generally looks roughly like this. We have an introduction, 10% approximately of the total word count. Then we have main body paragraphs. Now in this case there are 3, but in your essay there can be more than that. It depends partly on the length of the essay, and more importantly on how many main ideas you want to cover. As a general rule, 1 main idea per paragraph. And finally, of course, we have a conclusion, which is also about 10% of the total word count. You will also need to have a reference list for your essay, but this is not included in the word count. So an essay introduction, as we've said, is about 10% of the word count. It's usually 1 paragraph, depending again on the length of your essay. It usually starts with a general background to the topic, perhaps explaining why it's important. Why is it something that we need to be thinking about and reading about? It then contains your thesis. What is it you want to say? What is it you want to try to convince that your readers is valid? And then most often it outlines your arguments. How will you prove the thesis that you're going to try and prove? What will be your basic structure and what arguments will you use? We can often say that the structure of an introduction is somewhat like a funnel or an upside down pyramid, in that it starts out with very broad background information and then narrows down to more specific information through our thesis statement and the outline of our arguments. Let's have a look at a sample introduction. Just pause this video for a minute and see if you can identify the three key parts of the introduction. Hopefully you've had time to pause the video and you've gone through and seen that the first three sentences give the introduction to the topic, the general background, including why this is an important topic that's worth paying attention to. The following sentence is the thesis that this particular writer has chosen to try and persuade their readers is a valid point. The final sentence outlines the arguments that they're going to use to try to prove this particular thesis. This introduction is a typical kind of structure. It's useful in that it guides the reader through what to expect. We now know as readers what they're going to argue, and we know roughly the kind of structure that they're going to follow in arguing that. In terms of the main body, the number of paragraphs depends, as we said, on the number of main ideas. The important thing is that all body paragraphs should have a topic sentence, which generally introduces the key idea, the main idea of that paragraph. You will then introduce the ideas of others in the supporting statements. You will refer to other people's ideas, other people's evidence, other people's words. And then you will have a concluding sentence which either summarizes the content of that paragraph or evaluates the ideas that you've presented in that paragraph. Each paragraph should be linked together in some sort of logical structure so that the reader is clear why you have moved from one idea to the next. Let's have a look at an example main body paragraph. We can see in this paragraph that there is a clear topic sentence. There are numerous definitions of business ethics. We know now that this whole paragraph should be giving us the definitions, the explanations of what business ethics actually means. And we can see that it does do that. It introduces several different writers' points of view, and it makes it clear through this clear linking words like another definition and in addition. It shows us that it's adding more and more definitions. How is it doing that? Well, it's doing that through citing other authors, and then at the end of the paragraph it summarizes or synthesizes all of those authors and gives the writer's own point of view. To cite or summarize other authors, we must include their names either in the sentence, as has been done in these two examples, or in brackets at the end of the sentence, as has been done in these two examples. Either way is fine. The important thing is that we include the author's surname and the year of publication. And also, if it's a quote, we need to give a page number to show exactly which page that particular quote came from. And of course, we would use quotation marks for a quote to show that it is the direct words of that other writer. If it's not that writer's other direct words, if we've paraphrased and put it into our own words, we don't need quotation marks, but we still give a citation. We still say where the idea came from, because it's not just the words that's important, it's the idea. Whose idea is it? Then, once we've written our main body paragraphs, it's time to write a conclusion. The conclusions need to do three key things. It restates the thesis, what is it that you tried to convince your readers of. It summarizes your key points or your arguments. How did you try to convince the reader of this? And then usually it makes also a broad concluding statement. Let's have a look at an example paragraph, but first let's look at the language that can be used to try to introduce the conclusion. Often we see conclusions introduced with phrases such as in conclusion, or to sum up, or it is clear that, and then they repeat the thesis. What is it they tried to convince you of? In this example, we've used that last example that we showed. It is clear that ethical behavior is important as a concept and as an aspect of business activity. That is the thesis that they tried to convince us of throughout the essay. Next come the arguments that they tried to use to support that thesis. And then finally we have a concluding statement, which in this case is some sort of suggestion or recommendation based on the arguments that they've made throughout the essay. The important thing with your essay is that you always focus first and foremost on making your meaning clear. Many students think that they need to write long sentences and use big words in an attempt to try and write in an academic style. Not really sure what that means. But I would strongly suggest that instead of doing that, you focus on making your meaning clear, which will often mean using short sentences, simple words. The key thing is that you have researched the topic, that you have used other people's ideas to try and support the arguments you're making, and that you have made a clear argument throughout your essay. If you've done that, if you've had a clear thesis with clear arguments written in a clear structure, you're very likely to do well in your essay, regardless of the topic. Thanks for taking the time to watch this video. If you would like to see other sources of information that ALS provide, or you'd like to book an individual consultation, please go to the ALS website. The address is on your screen there, and make a booking with us or use some of the other resources available. And good luck with your essay.